All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going exploring the kind of crazy world where ancient alchemy meets, like, the latest physics and then throws consciousness into the mix.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, right? We're going to be tackling some pretty big questions, like, is there really something to this idea that substances, like gold powder, can actually lead to a longer life and, like, a higher level of consciousness?
No, good one.
And what can we learn about time? And the idea of maybe jumping between different dimensions by looking at both ancient myths and what modern science is telling us.
It's a whole lot to unpack.
It is. And the biggest question of all, at least for me, is there anything in all this that we can use in our own lives, make it practical?
I'm all for practical.
Me too. And to help us sort through all this, we're going deep into this interview with Dan Winter and Jay Widener. They're experts in, well, a whole bunch of stuff. Sacred geometry, biophysics, and all sorts of esoteric knowledge.
Sounds like they know their stuff.
Oh, they definitely do. Now, one thing that really stuck with me from Dan Winter was how much he emphasized language, especially the language they used in alchemy.
Like secret code words and stuff?
Kinda, yeah. But he's saying it's not just about the words themselves, but they carry, like, a deeper hidden meaning,
Ooh, that's interesting. So if you crack the code, you unlock a whole new level of understanding.
Right. And one of the biggies in this alchemical language is the Philosopher's Stone. All those legends and stories.
Like turning lead into gold, right?
Exactly. But Dan Winter connects it to some actual things in the world, like real stuff.
Really? What kind of stuff?
He mentions meteorites, specifically the ones called Lucifer's Eye, and then there's the Kabi's Stone.
Mm-hmm.
And get this, he even brings up gold powder that alchemists use.
Gold powder, huh? I'm intrigued.
Me too. What's the deal with that?
Well, from what Winter says, the materials in those meteorites and gold, they have this thing called a high dielectric constant. Basically, they can store a ton of electrical energy, like a super battery.
Okay, I think I get that. So how does that connect to this Philosopher's Stone and all that alchemy stuff?
So Winter believes that these materials, with their super high energy storage, can do this thing called charge implosion. It's like all the energy collapses inward, making this crazy concentrated energy vortex.
Whoa, hold up. A vortex of energy? That sounds intense.
It is, and this implosion thing is where it gets really wild. People think it might be able to actually change matter itself and maybe even mess with gravity.
Wait, are we talking anti-gravity, like flying cars?
Some folks are definitely looking into it. Winter even thinks that old designs, like the Ark of the Covenant, might have used this principle to keep radioactive stuff contained. But to really get how it works, we need to dive deep into magnetic fields and how they interact with, well, everything.
Definitely saving that for another deep dive. But back to this gold powder. Jay Widener talked about his experiences with David Hudson, who did a ton of research on monoatomic gold. He even said it can make you live longer and have, like, mystical experiences.
Right, but he's also careful to point out that this kind of knowledge can be dangerous. Hudson's methods weren't always safe, and a lot of alchemists throughout history who stumbled onto this stuff supposedly ended up not so well. It's like this knowledge has always come with a warning label.
Makes you wonder why, right? If you found something that powerful, wouldn't you want to shout it from the rooftops?
Well, Jay's point is that the whole immortality thing in alchemy isn't just about living longer. It's about exploring different realities and expanding your consciousness. Maybe those who knew the secret understood that it could be used for good or for, well, not so good. It's a powerful thing.
It is. So is this where Dan Winter's idea of time being like a spin rate comes in? Instead of a straight line, time is more like this crazy dance of frequencies, right?
Exactly. And if we learn how to, like, sync up with certain frequencies, maybe through meditation or breath work, we might be able to tap into different dimensions. That's where this planes of Sharon idea comes in. The electron shells of monoatomic gold, they might actually be like reflections of those spiritual dimensions.
So we could literally change how we perceive time, experience reality in a completely new way. That's a lot.
It is. But to get how that might even be possible, we need to explore what it means to reach this still point within ourselves. It's like this super heightened awareness, this expanded consciousness that could be the key to unlocking these hidden dimensions of time and reality.
Okay, I'm following so far. But what I really want to know is, how can we actually use this stuff? Are there, like, techniques or practices we can do to get to this still point and maybe experience these shifts in consciousness for ourselves?
Oh yeah, totally. The interview mentions a few things. There's breath work for something called sacrocranial entrainment, which basically helps your body and mind get in sync.
Mhm.
Then there's using crystals and water, like tapping into their energy vibrations. And get this, there's this ancient fire ritual called Agnihotra, done at very specific times, that might let us connect with these cosmic frequencies.
Agnihotra, that one sounds intense. What's the idea behind it?
It's actually super interesting, and it ties into modern science stuff like four-wave mixing and phase conjugation. It's all about using light waves to create implosion, which is like super important in both physics and alchemy.
Okay, I'm seeing how ancient wisdom and modern science are like shaking hands here. But what's it all mean for us, like practically speaking? How can we use this stuff in our everyday lives?
Think of reaching that still point, like, the lucid dreaming. When you hit that level of awareness, you might be able to navigate those near-death experiences more clearly, or maybe even, and I know this sounds crazy, achieve a longer lifespan.
Whoa, okay. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's dig into this idea of enabled compression. Dan Winter seems to think it's not just key to understanding alchemy, but also to spiritual bliss and maybe even the very nature of reality itself.
Yeah, right. That's a big one. Think of it like packing a suitcase, but like super efficiently. When energy implodes in a way that doesn't destroy things, it creates order and harmony, which leads to all sorts of crazy phenomena.
So instead of things flying apart, they're coming together in this, like, perfect way.
Exactly. And this ties into what Jay Widener says about what happens when we die. He says our entire electrical field kind of collapses inward, travels up the spine, and then, boom, into another reality.
Intense journey. But he also says we can experience this kind of shift while we're still alive, right?
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting. Jay's been looking at certain plants, especially the ones with DMT in them, as a way to trigger these out-of-body experiences and maybe even access knowledge from other realms.
DMT, the spirit molecule. We're going full
Yeah.
psychedelic here.
What's important to remember that these substances have been used for centuries in spiritual and shamanic traditions. The key is to approach them with respect and understanding, recognizing they can seriously alter your consciousness.
And speaking of altered states, Dan Winter brings up this fascinating connection between lucid dreaming and being able to navigate those near-death experiences. He thinks both involve a similar process where your aura becomes super coherent and can, like, travel across dimensions, essentially tapping into this bigger energy field.
Like our consciousness is tuning into a much wider spectrum of reality. And this connects to that story about the Stargate portal, the one John Charles Moyen experienced during a lucid dream, where his consciousness seemed to merge with another dimension.
So are we talking about literally stepping outside the limits of time and space?
Maybe, but it takes a deep understanding of how energy flows and how to create the conditions for this kind of implosion within ourselves.
Okay, so we've covered alchemy, gold powder, time as a spin rate, and even jumping between dimensions. What about this monument at the end of time? Where does that fit in?
Remember, Dan Winter's big thing is that to understand time, you got to understand spin rates and how they interact. He thinks there are certain points in time, especially those lined up with the golden ratio, that create this kind of implosion vortex, letting us access other dimensions.
Like a cosmic doorway opening at a specific moment.
Exactly. And this could be what Vincent Bridges was talking about with the Cross of Hend, which is this astrological and magnetic cross point. It could be a point in time and space where all these energies come together, creating this powerful portal.
And that connects to the Mayan calendar and the whole galactic alignment thing, right?
Absolutely. The Mayan calendar was amazingly advanced in its understanding of cosmic cycles. It basically suggests that there are times when the Earth, Sun, and the galactic center all line up, creating this huge surge of energy that can shift consciousness.
Wow, so these events could potentially affect the whole planet. Oh.
Potentially. And this is where the physics of coincidence comes in. Dan Winter's done a ton of research on how events tend to cluster around these golden ratio points in time. It's like there's a hidden pattern to how reality unfolds, this cosmic dance of energy and information.
So instead of random chaos, there's an order to things, but it's operating on a level we don't usually see.
Exactly. And that raises the question, can we tap into these rhythms and patterns intentionally to create a more harmonious experience of reality?
Okay, I'm getting the bigger picture here, but how do we actually use this knowledge? What can we do?
Well, the first step is simply becoming aware of these ideas and starting to pay attention to the coincidences in our own lives. Notice those times when things just seem to fall into place perfectly, or when you have a sudden flash of insight.
So pay attention to those aha moments and try to understand what's going on beneath the surface.
Exactly. And then we can explore those techniques we talked about before, the breath work, meditation, working with crystals and water, or even trying that Agnihotra fire ritual. The key is to find what works for you and helps you cultivate that inner stillness and connection to the cosmic rhythms.
It sounds like it's about becoming more sensitive to the energies around us and within us.
Absolutely. And as we get better at harmonizing with those rhythms, we might discover that we can experience reality in ways we never thought possible.
This is definitely a lot to think about, but it's incredibly exciting. It makes you realize that we're not just watching this cosmic dance, we're a part of it, and we can actually shape our own experience of reality.
That's the beauty of it. It's about recognizing our own power and potential and stepping into a more conscious and creative role in the unfolding of our lives and maybe even the universe itself. It's wild how this idea of like energy imploding, this enabled compression thing, keeps popping up in both ancient wisdom and now in like cutting edge physics.
Right. It's like there's this hidden principle connecting everything from how galaxies form to like feeling pure bliss.
Totally. And it gets even crazier when you think about how this implosion connects to how we experience time. Dan Winters says the monument at the end of time isn't an actual place, but more like a point in time where all these implosive forces come together.
So it's not a physical thing, but more like a moment when the walls between dimensions get kind of thin.
Exactly. And this connects to what Vincent Bridges was saying about the Cross of Hend, which is like this astrological and magnetic intersection point. He thinks it marks a specific time and place where these energies all meet up, maybe creating a super powerful portal.
It's like those old myths about gateways to other worlds, like the Axis Mundi or the World Tree. It seems like people have been sensing this stuff for ages.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Maybe those ancient myths were hinting at these cosmic principles all along.
Speaking of ancient stuff,
Yeah.
How does the Mayan calendar fit into all of this? I know it's famous for its understanding of cosmic cycles and how time works.
The Mayan calendar is mind-blowing. It shows a deep understanding of how time and consciousness are connected. And it points to the idea that there are specific moments, like the galactic alignment, where all these cosmic energies come together and can create a shift in consciousness, maybe even affecting the whole planet.
So it's not just about personal change, but maybe a huge leap forward for all of humanity.
That's the idea. And this is where Dan Winters' research on the physics of coincidence comes in. He's found that big events tend to happen around these golden ratio points in time, which suggests there's a pattern to things that seem random.
So instead of just chaos, there's a hidden order, a rhythm to the universe.
Exactly. And if we learn how to tune into that rhythm, we might be able to ride the waves of time more smoothly, creating a more harmonious experience of reality.
Okay, I get that. But how do we actually use this knowledge in our lives? It all seems kind of abstract and a bit overwhelming, to be honest.
I hear you. It can be a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But the first step is just being aware of these ideas and noticing those synchronicities in your own life. Those times when things just click into place or you get a sudden insight out of nowhere.
So pay attention to those aha moments and try to see the deeper meaning behind them.
Yeah. And then we can start exploring those techniques. We talked about breath work, meditation, working with crystals and water, maybe even that Agnihotra fire ritual. It's all about finding what works for you and helps you get to that place of inner stillness, that connection to those cosmic rhythms.
It sounds like it's all about becoming more sensitive to the energies around and within us.
Absolutely. And as we develop that awareness, we might find that we can experience reality in ways we never imagined possible.
This is really pushing the boundaries of what I thought was possible. It's exciting, but also a little bit intimidating.
It's a journey, and it's okay to feel all sorts of things about it. But remember, you're not alone in this. Tons of people throughout history have tried to understand these mysteries and tap into their own hidden potential.
That's good to hear. So where do we go from here? How do we continue exploring this alchemy of time thing?
One way is to look into this hyperdimensional torsion field physics. It's a pretty new area of study, but it could change how we think about time, space, and consciousness.
Torsion fields. I've heard that term, but it sounds like something out of Star Trek, to be honest. Can you explain it in simpler terms?
Think of torsion fields as invisible forces created by things that spin. They might be a fundamental part of the universe, shaping how energy and information flow, and they challenge our usual ideas about time and space.
So they're like these invisible currents that shape the very fabric of reality.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that some researchers believe we can actually learn to work with these torsion fields, like consciously influencing them.
Wait, are we talking about being able to actually change the course of events by using these torsion fields?
It's a big claim, and we're still in the early stages of figuring it out. But the idea is that by aligning our own energy with these cosmic torsion fields, we might create a more harmonious experience of reality.
So we're not just along for the ride. We can actually participate in shaping our own reality.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the importance of that still point within us. When we reach that state of inner harmony and alignment, we become more receptive to these subtle energies and maybe even influence them more consciously.
So it's like becoming a more powerful antenna, picking up on the signals of the universe and broadcasting our intentions more effectively.
Love that analogy. And Dan Winter actually talks about a geometric pattern called the tetracubic embedding that he thinks makes this flow of energy and information super efficient, like a blueprint for building harmony on a fundamental level.
So it's not just about our own energy, but also about the structures and patterns around us.
Yeah, and there's another powerful symbol of harmony that comes into play here, the pent, the five-pointed star.
The pent, I know that one.
Yeah.
It's everywhere, from ancient symbols to modern designs.
Right. And it's not a coincidence. You see the pent throughout nature, from how flower petals are arranged to the structure of DNA. It's a reminder that there's an underlying order to the universe, and we can tap into that order by aligning ourselves with it.
So if we surround ourselves with these harmonious patterns and structures, can we actually boost our own energy and well-being?
That's the idea. And this connects to Vincent Bridges' research on the Ophanum Enochian angel alphabet. These ancient symbols are thought to represent different parts of the divine, and maybe we can use them to connect with higher levels of consciousness.
So we're talking about using language and symbols as tools for spiritual transformation.
Absolutely. And this takes us back to the idea of dying successfully. Jay Widener says it's not just about physical death, but more about going beyond the limits of our ego and merging with something bigger.
So it's about letting go of our attachment to the material world and embracing those infinite possibilities of the spiritual realm.
Right. And this connects to the idea of those secrets from the mystery schools, those ancient traditions that taught people how to reach those higher states of consciousness and navigate the afterlife.
It sounds like those mystery schools were guarding some pretty profound knowledge.
They were. And while a lot of that knowledge has been lost or hidden, there are still pieces of it scattered around the world. It's up to us to put those pieces together and create a new understanding of what's possible for humanity.
That's inspiring. It feels like we're on the edge of something new, where ancient wisdom and modern science are coming together to show us the amazing potential we all have.
I think you're right. And as we dive deeper into these mysteries, it's so important to do it with respect, humility, and a willingness to open our minds to new possibilities.
Well said. Speaking of expanding our understanding, there's this one thing that keeps coming back to me throughout this whole deep dive, those planes of Sharon. Can we go back to that and explore it a bit more?
For sure. It's a really fascinating concept that connects physics and spirituality. Remember we were talking about monoatomic gold and how it can store so much energy?
Yeah, you said it could create that charge implosion and maybe even change matter itself.
Right. Well, the planes of Sharon are thought to be the electron shells of monoatomic gold, and some believe they're like a mirror image of spiritual dimensions.
So there's a connection between the physical properties of matter and the structure of spiritual realms.
Exactly. It's like the small stuff reflecting the big stuff, the material world echoing the spiritual world. And this idea ties into the concept that heaven might not be a physical place, but more like a state of pure energy and consciousness where charge is perfectly distributed.
That's pretty mind-blowing. It's like we're getting a glimpse into a whole new way of understanding reality, where science and spirituality aren't separate, but woven together.
Exactly. And that interconnectedness is at the heart of alchemy, where changing matter is seen as a metaphor for transforming consciousness.
I'm starting to see how all these different pieces fit together. It's like a tapestry, revealing this amazing, complex pattern.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And as we continue to explore these mysteries, we might find that the tapestry is even more intricate and beautiful than we could have imagined.
This has been an incredibly enriching deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on time, consciousness, and what reality really is. But I gotta be honest, my head is spinning with all this new information.
I can imagine. It's definitely a lot to process. But remember, the journey is just as important as the destination.
That's a good reminder. So we're not expected to have all the answers, but to just keep exploring and learning.
Exactly. And as we go deeper, we might find that the journey itself is the greatest teacher.
I like that. It's about embracing the process of discovery and letting the wisdom we find along the way transform us.
Exactly. And as we keep exploring these mysteries, we might realize we're not just uncovering ancient secrets, but rediscovering the incredible potential within each of us.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of myself, the universe, and how everything's connected. But I'm curious about this monument at the end of time thing. Could we go back to that and explore it a bit more?
Definitely. It's a concept that sparks the imagination and makes us think about the nature of time itself. Remember when we talked about Dan Winter's idea that certain points in time, especially those aligned with the golden ratio, create this implosion vortex?
Yeah. You said those points in time might act like gateways to other dimensions.
Right. Well, some people think the monument at the end of time isn't a physical structure, but more like a convergence point in time when all these implosive forces peak.
So it's not a place, but a time, a moment of transformation.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this ties into the idea of cosmic cycles, those ebbs and flows of energy that shape the universe.
It's like we're being invited to see time not just as a straight line, but as something cyclical, with moments of heightened potential within those cycles.
Exactly. And those moments of heightened potential could be those golden ratio points in time when the boundaries between dimensions get blurry.
This is starting to sound like something straight out of a science fiction movie. But it also feels strangely familiar, like it's tapping into some ancient wisdom that's been inside us all along.
I agree. It's this awesome blend of ancient wisdom and modern scientific exploration.
I'm starting to see how it all fits together. The alchemy, the nature of time, exploring consciousness, and the possibility of transformation for both individuals and the whole planet.
It is. It's a truly holistic view, one that invites us to see ourselves as part of something much greater than ourselves.
This deep dive has been mind-blowing. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of the mysteries of the universe and the incredible potential we all have. Man, it feels like we've been on this incredible adventure, exploring how ancient alchemy and modern physics are connected and how consciousness fits into it all.
It has been quite the journey, hasn't it? And we've uncovered some really fascinating ideas along the way.
We've covered so much, like that enabled compression concept and the whole monoatomic gold thing. And then there's time being like a spin rate and the possibility of, maybe even jumping between dimensions.
Yeah, and we even talked about practical techniques like breath work and that Agnihotra fire ritual, plus those deeper concepts like plains of Sharon and that monument at the end of time thing.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, but it's also incredibly inspiring to think about what might be possible when you see how everything's connected.
I totally agree. It really makes you rethink what you thought you knew and embrace a bigger, more holistic view of, well, everything, life, death, and what this whole reality thing even is.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways, things our listeners can think about and maybe even apply to their own lives?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we're not just sitting on the sidelines watching this cosmic show. We actually have the power to create our own reality and experience all the amazing possibilities the universe has to offer.
That's so powerful. It's not about waiting for things to happen, but actually taking an active role in shaping our own destiny.
Exactly. And that means doing those things that help us connect to those subtle energies and reach that still point within ourselves. Remember all those techniques we talked about? Breathwork, meditation, working with crystals and water, even that Agnihotra fire ritual.
It's about finding what works for you and making those practices part of your everyday life. Weaving those principles into who you are and letting them guide your thoughts, actions, and experiences.
Exactly. And as we do that, we might find that we're not just tapping into some ancient wisdom, but also rediscovering the incredible potential that's inside all of us.
This deep dive has been an amazing journey. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of myself, the universe, and how everything is connected.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you. Remember, the journey doesn't stop here. There's always more to explore, more to discover, and more to experience.
That's right. So to our listeners, keep seeking, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into those mysteries that spark your curiosity.
And remember, the universe is full of wonder and possibility. It's up to each of us to step into our power and create the reality we want to see.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.